Hey, you guys, welcome back. Today we're going to go over evaluating expressions. Before we do that, though, fact number 30 about me. I'm going to tell you guys about the most disappointing experience of my life. So, I'm a really big movie guy, love it. And about 10 years ago, I actually got the chance to be an extra in a movie. And if you don't know what that is, it's really cool. Anytime you watch a movie, you see the actors on screen and they have the lines and they're saying things and they're doing the actual acting. They have a character name, all that stuff. Anybody in the background, those people are not there accidentally. Those people are all there on purpose and they're being paid to be an extra. So it's like an extra person in a movie who kind of makes the movie look a little more real, right? If you're in a restaurant, the extra people who are at the tables around, the main actors, those are extras to give it kind of a real feel, right? To make it look like they're in a real restaurant. So about 10 years ago, I actually got to be an extra in a movie. It was this movie called First Man. I have the poster over here. It's called First Man because it's about the first man to walk on the moon, Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong was played by Ryan Gosling. I don't know if you guys know him. He was kind of I don't know, he's still a movie star for sure, but maybe not as much for your generation. But he played Neil Armstrong in the movie. It was directed by this guy named Damien Chazelle, who's a really big director out in Hollywood. He's one of my favorites too. Anyway, I was so excited. They filmed it down in Atlanta, just about an hour from here. It was the coolest thing ever. Ryan Gosling was there. He spoke to me. It was awesome. Damien Chazelle, the director, he was there. I said hello. It was the coolest experience of my life. I loved every single second. It may have been the greatest day of my entire life. Just was so happy the whole day. There were cameras everywhere. We got to go and film a scene. I was a construction worker. I had like a top hat and a gray like jumpsuit kind of thing. Had a shovel. The whole goal, at least the whole action of my scene, was I was just shoveling rocks around Ryan Gosling while he was talking because they were working on building the spacecraft. So I was one of the construction guys helping with the building of that. So that was on November 7th when we filmed. I only remember because it was the day after my birthday. About a year later is when the movie came out because movies take a long time after they're done filming to edit and get ready for the movie theater. So I go to the movie theater with my family because I had told them about it all year long. And honestly, I'd probably thought about this every day since we filmed. I get there. I'm so excited for my scene to come up and see myself on a big screen in a movie theater. And then I found out they cut my scene. It wasn't in there. I waited for an entire year to see myself on a big screen in a movie, especially a movie like this, and it wasn't there. To say it was the biggest disappointment of my life is an understatement. I was so excited. And then nothing. So, again, this movie called First Man, pretty boring. Honestly, I wouldn't suggest watching it. Neil Armstrong seems like a cool guy. He did a lot of great things. Obviously, we all know who he is. The movie itself, pretty boring. Don't recommend it. Don't go watch it. You wouldn't like it. But, however, even though it was the biggest disappointment of my life, it was probably the happiest day of my life. So it's kind of funny how sometimes those things could go hand in hand, those two experiences, you know? So, anyway, after that, let's get back to the math. So, we're going to talk about evaluating expressions. Evaluating expressions is great because all we're doing is giving you an expression, and now we're going to tell you what the variables are. So, if I give you x plus y, like this first one, I'm actually going to tell you what x is. I'm going to tell you what y is. And now I'm going to use substitution. That's the math word. I'm going to go and plug these variables back in. Every time I see an x, I'm going to put a 2. Keep the operations the same. Every time I see a y, I'm going to go put a 7. So now this expression is 2 plus 7. I can solve that. That gives me 9. That's my answer. Let's look at the next one. Negative 5x. I'm going to rewrite this expression, and every time I see an x, I'm going to put a 3. Now watch. The way I did it here, I just wrote a 3 instead of an x. That looks right, right? It's not. When I do this number now looks like negative 53. That's not what evaluating expressions is, okay? I'm not just going to write negative 53 because we have to remember that negative 5x, even though there's no operation in the middle of those two things, they're being multiplied. There's multiplication going on there. So watch how I do it. I always separate this with parentheses. That reminds me to multiply. All right? A coefficient, the negative 5, and the variable, even though there's no operation between, we're multiplying them. So this is really negative 5 times 3, which gives me negative 15. Let's look at the next one. 7x plus 2x plus 3y. X is negative 2. y is 4. I'm going to go and plug those numbers back into my original expression. So every time I see an x, I'm going to put a negative 2. But remember, I'm not just going to write a negative 2. This is multiplication, and I need it to stay that way. So I'm going to put parentheses around the negative 2. That's going to remind me that this is multiplication. Everything else I'm just going to write as is. So this plus sign. The x, I'll put a negative 2 there. Plus 3, and then every time I see a y, I'm going to write a 4. Now remember, it's multiplication going on between the 3 and the y. The coefficient and the variable are always being multiplied together. So let's go solve this. 7 times negative 2, that gives me negative 14. And I'm going to go and do all the multiplication first because we remember, because we talked about it so much in class, PEMDAS, right? The order of operations. This tells me the order I have to do these things in. Parentheses is for the p, e is for exponent. MD, that's for multiplication and division. I put them on the same line because they're weighted the same. I don't do multiplication first necessarily. I do whichever one comes first in the problem, but I do have to take care of all these things before addition and subtraction. So let's go and do all the multiplication first. Negative 14, negative 4, 12. Bring down my plus signs. Negative 14 and negative 4, that gives me negative 18 plus 12. I'm doing the addition. And remember, I can really only do addition with 2 numbers at a time. Any more than that, it gets kind of difficult. So I'm going to do negative 14 plus negative 4 gives me negative 18. I'm just going to bring down the 12. And now I can do negative 18 plus 12, which gives me negative 6. Our whole goal is to get one final number. We're evaluating the expression. We're finding the value of it. So negative 6 is what I end up with. Sometimes we see this little upside down triangle. That kind of reminds us that we're going for one number. It gets smaller as we go and do our steps. Let's look at the next one. Negative 6x minus 8y minus 3y. I'm going to go and fill in a negative 3 every time I see an x. And remember, it's multiplying. Then I'll fill in everything else as it was in the equation. Minus 8. Y's are all negative 1. Minus 3 times negative 1. Now I'll go and do all the multiplication steps. Negative 6 times negative 3, that gives me 18. Oh, I always like to change these to addition and the sign of the following number. Addition and the sign of the following number. Negative 8 times negative 1, that gives me positive 8. Negative 3 times negative 1, that gives me positive 3. So now I have 18 plus 8, that gives me 26 plus 3. 26 plus 3 gives me 29. Final answer. Let's look at the next one. Let me scroll down a little bit here, though. There we go. I'm going to give that work an erase so I have plenty of room to write. Let's look at number 2. Oh, where's the pen? There we go. What's it doing? There we go. All right, so I got to get back. There we go. I have 2x to the second power. Now, this is an exponent. And remember, whenever we have an exponent, let's say we have 5 to the second power. That is not saying I need to do 5 times 2. That's not right. Instead, this is saying I need to do 5 times 5. It's to the second power, so when I set up a multiplication problem, I want 2 5s. 1, 2. Second power, 2 5s. That's how many times I'm going to multiply it. So I get 5 times 5 is 25. That's how exponents work. Don't just multiply it by 2. That's not it, okay? Be very careful. Let me give that an erase so I have plenty of room to work, though. So now this is saying that I have 2x to the second power. So every time I see an x, I'm going to go and put a 3 because we tell you it's 3. It's multiplication between the 2 and the x. And now I have this 2 up here. It's squared. So whenever we look at the order of operations, I have parentheses first, but that's really more like if there's an operation going on in the parentheses. Like if it was 5 plus 4. That's parentheses I can do. This parentheses is only reminding me that I'm multiplying. After the parentheses, I have exponents. And look, I actually have an exponent here. So I'm going to do 3 to the second power, which is the same as 3 times 3. So that just gives me 9. I'll bring down the 2, keep the parentheses because I'm still multiplying. And 2 times 9 is 18. So that is my final answer there, 18. Let's look at the next one. Negative 3y to the second power plus 4x. So I'm going to go and rewrite my expression. Every time I see a y, I'm going to go and put a negative 2. add my squared up there, the second power we call squared, plus 4, and every time I see an x, I'm going to put a 2. So now, let me go and use my order of operations. I have no parentheses because, again, this is the parentheses stuff I'm looking for, with something to do inside the parentheses. This, however, comes next as exponents. So I have negative 2 to the second power. That's like negative 2 times another negative 2. It's just a number multiplied by itself. Negative 2 times negative 2, that gives me positive 4. And then I'll go and bring down everything else that I didn't mess with yet. So now, looking at the order of operations, I took care of exponents. I have multiplication and division next. I have to do all of those in this expression. So I'm not going to add anything yet. I'm just going to go and multiply everything that I have. Negative 3 times 4 gives me negative 12. 4 times 2 gives me 8. I'll bring down the plus sign. And now I took care of all the multiplication. I'm going to move down to the addition and subtraction. Only have one addition problem. Negative 12 plus 8 gives me negative 4. Final answer. Let's look at this one down here. Negative 5a plus 3b minus 7c. I'm going to rewrite my expression and go and plug in all these variables with the numbers that I tell you they are. This one, every time I see an a, I'm going to put a negative 3. Oh, whoops. 5 times negative 3 plus 3. Every time I see a b, I'm going to put a 2. And remember, once again, every time there's a variable with a coefficient, these are being multiplied together. All right? Minus 7, every time I see a c, I'm going to put a negative 1 inside those parentheses. Let me erase that because that's kind of hard to read. Negative 1, perfect. And now I'm going to go and do all the multiplication steps. But you know what? Every time I see these subtraction signs, I like to change them to addition and change the sign of the following number. It helps me keep my signs straight. So looking at this, I have negative 5 times negative 3, that gives me 15. 3 times 2, that gives me 6. Negative 7 times negative 1, that gives me positive 7. Bring down my plus signs. And now that I've taken care of all the multiplication steps, I can go and do all the addition. So I'm going to do one at a time. 15 plus 6, that gives me 21. Bring down the plus 7 over here. 21 plus 7 gives me 28. That's our final answer right there. Let's look at this one over here. Wow, that has a lot of terms in it. So let me rewrite it. And every time I see an x, I'm going to put a negative 2 in there. Negative 2. Minus 9. Every time I see a y, I'm going to put a negative 3. Plus 4. Plus 3. Every time I see an x, it's a negative 2. Let me move this out of the way because I'm out of room over there. Let's see. Minus 5. And every time a y is a negative 3. There we go. So let's go and do all the multiplication steps. I can't do the addition or subtraction yet because multiplication comes first. But you know what? I do like to go and change all this subtraction to addition and the sign of the following number. It helps me keep my signs straight that way, okay? If you didn't, that's cool. Just make sure you're really careful with your signs, okay? Negative 2 times negative 2 gives me 4. Negative 9 times negative 3, that gives me 27. Oh, that 4 can't do anything. 3 times negative 1, that gives me negative 3. Negative 5 times negative 3, that gives me 15. Then I'll go and bring down all the other stuff. Oh, I couldn't use that 4. I'll bring it down, and that plus. Plus. So now I just have a lot of terms to add. I'll do one at a time because that's really all I can do. 4 plus 27, that gives me 31. I'll bring down everything else. Doing it in steps is okay. It's just fine. You won't make mistakes, or you're a lot less likely to make mistakes that way. So 31 plus 4, 35, plus negative 3, plus 15. 35 plus negative 3, different signs. I'll subtract. I get 32. Plus 15. Let's see, 32 plus 15, that gives me, let's see, 5 and 2 is 7, 3. Oh, so I get 47 as my final answer. Now, that is evaluating expressions, all right? So, thank you guys for sticking around and watching the whole video, and I will see you guys in class tomorrow, all right?